Hello everyone, this is Neha Sharma, your English language teacher. Today in this video, we will start a letter to God, which is written by G.L. Fenitis. This is chapter number 1 of your English reader first flight. Before we start this chapter, I want to tell that when we are in some trouble, we communicate with our friends, teachers, relations, and superiors, verbally or through letters or emails or by phone calls. We can't communicate with any mortal using our mind. On the contrary, we convey our thoughts with God mentally, not through letters or mails. Lencho, the humble farmer, was a very simple and pure man in this story. In a way, he was a knave too. In his hour of distress, he chose to say his wishes to God through letter. We might feel it a very foolish act, but if we examine the story, our mind is swayed by Lencho's simplicity and his complete faith in God from the story. He emerges with an radiant aura of piousness. When we talk about G.L. Fenitis, he was a Mexican writer and best remembered for his leading chronicler of the Mexican Revolution, which broke out when he was 15, working in his father's general store. He came in contact with the farmers and the laborers and later described their lives with deep insight. His fiction is distinguished by the anonymous nature of the characters, archetypes overshadowing individuals. This story is about one such archetype. Archetype means a very typical example of certain person or things. Strong faith with far-fetched results considering the author's timeline. The story is probably set in 1920s, shortly after the end of Mexican Revolution. So let me tell you the gist of the story, A Letter to God. Please listen that carefully. Lencho was a small farmer with a modest land holding where he grows corn. His small house, standing lonely in the midst of a valley, had his 5 children and his wife. The elder ones among his children helped Lencho in the farms. The younger ones just played around. The rich, ripe corns plants filled Lencho's heart with joy. Some seasonal flowers blossomed nearby, signaling a good harvest. However, the corn plants were thirsty and showed all signs of distress. Lencho desperately needed some rain, some water to quench the thirst of his corn plants. Luckily for him, clouds gathered in the sky. Lencho was excited. He told his wife that the wait for rain was finally going to end. The wife summoned all the children home for dinner. Just around then, big drops of rain started to fall, making Lencho even more excited. The clouds were gathering from the northeast. Lencho was unable to contain his joy, went outdoors to have his body drenched in the welcome rain. He said that the water drops were like the raining of cash. The bigger drops were worth 10 cents and the smaller ones were worth 5 cents. He saw a bumper crop and a good income. When Lencho was lost in the thoughts of his corn, crop getting the life-giving showers. He was jolted by seeing a strong gust of wind coming, swooping down on his field. Hailstorms came pounding down on the area. The children, curious as ever, rushed outside to collect the large ice pieces. Lencho became increasingly worried as the monstrous wind continued to ravage the area with heavy downpour and blistered hails. The cornfields, the hillside, the open spaces all looked as if covered with a white blanket. It was the hail that had settled on his crops. The trees were shredding by the falling snow pieces. Not a single leaf remained on them. The rich harvest of corn lay in tatters. The tender flower bore the burnt of the hails. Lencho surveyed his crops that was worth nothing now. He told his son that a swarm of locusts, perhaps, would have left behind something to salvage. He murmured to his son that there will be no corn that year for them to eat. Mournfully he said that there was none they could look up in their difficult time. Hunger loomed large on his family. In that hour of gloom, every member of Lencho's family believed God to be the ultimate savior. They were all convinced that the lack of corn wouldn't starve them to death. Lencho spent a sleepless night thinking of the omniscient God who saw everything and understood everything. Lencho was a stout farm hand, no doubt, but he had learned how to write. He thought he would write a mercy petition to God. The next day was a Sunday. He began his day by writing down what he wanted to communicate to God. It was sincere outpouring of his grief and his prayer. He set out to the nearby town to mail it to God. The letter was an appeal for 100 pesos that could enable him to raise a fresh crop and feed his family till the next crop. The letter was a prayer that came deep from his heart. The envelope had just one word as address, that was God. With worries still biting his mind, he walked to the town with the letter. He affixed a stamp on it and dropped it in the mailbox at the post office. In due course, an employee of the post office saw the letter with the unique address and went to the boss, somewhat amused to the addressee. The postmaster was a jovial man. He too had a hearty laugh, but soon realized that he was holding something unique in his hand. He instantly concluded it was a communication of a simple believer for his God. The simplicity and the devotion behind the letter moved the postmaster. He decided that the simple man deserved a reply. After all, God never fails to take note of a sincere prayer. He opened the letter to read its content. It became evident that the sender couldn't be satisfied with mere words only. The need was for some material assistance that needed money. He thought for a while and decided that the need of the man had to be met. He spoke to his colleagues. All of them gave whatever they could spare. The postmaster gave his share. All put together, it couldn't reach 100 pesos, but crossed the halfway mark. The postmaster neatly put the money inside a cover. signing of the latter with the single word God. The Sunday, Lencho reached the post office expectantly. The postman in the counter handed over the reply letter to him. The postmaster looked out from his chamber to see how Lencho reacted. He felt happily within for the small charity he had done on God's behalf. Lencho was so sure of God's benevolence that he had all but amused that the cover would have his 100 passes. However, the amount was less, he was miffed to see the shortfall. He knew God can never be a miser and couldn't make a counting mistake. He suspected that the post office staff possibly had pilfered the amount. Seething in resentment, he wanted to approach God again with a request to send the remaining 30 passes, as his envelope contained just 70 passes. He asked for a piece of paper and ink from the counter and went to the writing desk to pen his thoughtful letter. While thanking God for the generosity, he asked him to send the 30 passes directly to him, avoiding the post office. He didn't want another pilferage and said that do not send these remaining money through the mail, as he told the post office employees are the bunch of crooks. So that was the story of this chapter, A Letter to God. So dear students, we have read that technically the story A Letter to God revolves around how hailstorm destroyed his harvest. How a devastated and a worried Lencho writes a letter to God asking for 100 paisa. Was that really his faith or something else? Now we will discuss some of the important points which you have heard in the story. When we talk about Lencho, he was a farmer, or you may say he was a gullible and hard-working farmer. His house was on the crest or the top of a low hill. It was the only house in the entire valley. He cultivated corn. The only thing is cornfield needed was a downpour, that is a rain. When we talk about the lady or the woman in the story, so a lady that was Lencho's wife, and she was preparing supper. She then called the older boys working in the field for dinner. She also called the younger boys who were playing near the house for dinner. So only this is the role of the lady given here. When we talk about rain, as we heard that he wanted a downpour for his thirsty crops. So Lencho prayed for rain, and suddenly huge mountains of the clouds approached from the northeast. The air was fresh and sweet, and Lencho went out to feel the pleasure of the rain on his body. He considered raindrops as new coins. Big drops of the rain, he told, will give the profit of 10 cent pieces, and the small drops of rains are of 5 cent pieces. He was actually satisfied with the rain, right, with the ripe corn, with his flowers, and the field was draped in a curtain of rain. Till then, everything was okay. Suddenly, a mishappening occurred there. A strong wind began to blow along with the rain. Hailstones began to fall. Hailstones were like silver coins, he thought. Boys collected the frozen pearls. It took place for an hour. Everything, field, garden, hillside, house, everywhere, the white dew of hailstone as if covered with salt. So what was the effect of that hailstorm? Everything was destroyed. Corn was destroyed. Field was white due to hailstones. No leaf, flower on the plants and the trees. And Lencho thought that a plague of locusts would have leapt more than this. Lencho was depressed since they had nothing to eat that year. Next, we have listened that Lencho's reaction when he saw that mishappening. At first he was depressed, but later he had a ray of hope, and that was what? That was the help from God. He said, no one dies of hunger. That's why he wrote a letter to God. And the first letter of Lencho, what was there? Let's see. Once again, he began to write a letter. He said that if God didn't help him and family, they would go hungry. He asked 100 pesos to sow his fields again. He wrote everything about the mishappening as well. Put the letter in an envelope, went to the town, placed a stamp on the letter, dropped into the mailbox. And when the postman got the letter with the address God, so he laughed heartily, went to the postmaster, showed him the letter. What is the role of the postmaster here? Let's see. He was a fat, amiable fellow, laughed heartily at first, later became serious. He wished he too had such faith in God. Did not want Lencho to lose his faith in God. He thought to answer the letter, started collecting money from the employees, his friends and he himself for an act of charity. Like this he collected 70 pesos. He kept all that 70 pesos in the envelope, wrote God on the envelope. Means he signed the letter God. Next Sunday, when Lencho came to the post office to get the answer of the letter, so Lencho went to the post office, and there the postman handed him the letter, and the postmaster looked at then by sitting in his office the reaction of the farmer. So what was his reaction? He was not surprised at first because he knew that he would get the reply from God. That's why he came the next Sunday there. He became angry. He found only 70 pesos. He knew that God could never make a mistake. Now, when he got this letter with the money, then he was very upset that it is not the mistake of God. So he started writing the second letter to God once again, went up to the window, asked for the paper and ink, put the paper on public writing table and wrote the letter. He wrote that he got only 70 pesos and he wanted the rest 30 pesos also. He said not to send the money in the post office. He said to send through mail, and he called the post office employees as a bunch of crooks. So by this the story ends. Now dear students, I will request you to read this story from a textbook, and in next video we will do the reading from the text and I will do the explanation of the difficult words and the difficult terms and the phrases in the story. Till then, please listen the story and try to understand what is the story about. So when he finished the letter, when we are talking about the second letter, so when he finished the letter, he went to the window, he bought a stamp, he licked the stamp and affixed it to the envelope with a blow of his fist, dropped into the mailbox. At last the postmaster became curious to know what was written in his second letter. He went to the mailbox and read the letter. And there he came to know that he wrote, the post office employees are the bunch of crooks. So the moral of the lesson is, have faith in God, for He would always help us in any possible way. Thank you very much. Stay safe, stay healthy. Thanks a lot.